Hello and welcome everybody to the Two Jaded Villains podcast, where I'm a Meshi and you're a Meshi. As you guys can undoubtedly tell from our channel banner, we are giant Yu Yu Hakusho fans, and we thought what better way to kickstart this thing off than talking about it. Obviously not touching on every episode, but we wanted to give our brief thoughts and summaries on all the four of the arcs and how we like them, how we didn't like some aspects of it. Thought you guys might want to hear.
Yu Yu Hakusho, in a sense, is probably it's not our favorite anime, but it's our favorite shonen anime.
Definitely. I would say like Yu Yu Hakusho, when it came around and I got into it, it immediately captivated me and almost just took over. Like, I was obsessed with it as a kid. I remember first seeing Yu Yu Hakusho was back in the day, if anyone remembers, when Dragon Ball Z episodes and the movies, you used to be able to get them on VHS. Oftentimes you could get Dragon Ball Z episodes before they were even out on Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
Weird. But I had the Return of Cooler one where Cooler returns and as Metal Cooler. On the previews before the movie actually starts, when you put the VHS in, there was like a commercial for, new anime Funimation was coming out with, and one of them was Yu Yu Hakusho, and it was basically like showing the scenes of the Maze Castle arc. And I think at the time, Yu Yu Hakusho was coming on it ended up coming on Adult Swim. And ironically, like, that was like the first episode I saw, which was like when they were in the Gate of Betrayal and they had to hold the wall up.
Not a bad episode to start with, actually.
Yeah, it wasn't. That was the first episode I saw, and I had to try to catch it on Adult Swim, and that was hard to do as a kid. And then I think eventually, probably whoever did like, the rating scores for like Cartoon Network, stuff like that, and the demographics realized the same crowd of kids watching Dragon Ball Z or watching Yu Yu Hakusho. So then they moved it to Toonami, and they started all the way over from the Spirit Detective arc, with where Yusuke passes away, and I was like, I was just hooked. It was everything to me.
You had a more graceful introduction to it. I was really confused when the Yu Yu Hakusho anime started to air. My sister, essentially my gateway into anime for the most part, had the Yu Yu Hakusho movie. It was Poltergeist Report, I believe is what it was called.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to it, and I was into the movie. I liked the characters immediately, even not knowing the context of the characters, because the movie does a pretty poor job of introducing the characters to you. It was just assuming you knew Yu Yu Hakusho, which was, I thought, so bizarre, because it was a standalone movie. So when I was watching it, it kind of like had how most anime movies have it. It's not canon, so nothing really in the movie matters, but it still served as, it still had the characters in it, so I still dug all the characters. And then the voice casting was way different. So, the anime that we got's dub is great, when that wasn't the one I started with, and I still vastly prefer that. I'm more nostalgic for the voices of that movie, just because it's one of my first anime movies as a kid. But the actual dubbed anime stomps on it so hard. Justin Cook, man, I swear to God.
Yeah, the dub cast for Yu Yu Hakusho was really spectacular.
Top 5 of voice cast in any anime. Like, all the characters to me fit so perfectly. It's really early Chris Sabat for Kuwabara, showing his chops as well. Damn, I can't get enough of those characters and their voices.
Yeah, they were all really good. A standout voice was Linda Hunt as Genkai.
Oh.
For everyone who doesn't know, that was OG Frieza.
Yeah.
Back in the Cartoon Network days.
That was the old lady voice for me.
Basically, like, for us, if you guys can also tell by our banner, like, our 2 favorite characters from Yu Yu Hakusho, if not in all of anime for us, are Hiei and Kurama.
Our boys.
Yeah, those are just like, so when we kind of get into a lot of these arc breakdowns, we're going to be highlighting a lot of them. So, like, don't get mad if you're a Yusuke or you're a Kuwabara fan.
We love them too.
We like them too. We just, those dope. But he and Kurama, just like, for me, like, I was like, it was those 2 or bust.
Yeah.
And it was just like, like getting into Yu Yu Hakusho as it started with, Yusuke getting hit by the car. It was a different way, I thought, of starting it. Like, if you start Yu Yu Hakusho, like, I think it's one of those anime where, like, I always have to tell people, it's so good, you just gotta kind of get past.
And typically, I hate that same argument. But what was cool about Yu Yu Hakusho is that the build-up, through him getting hit by the car, they did a good enough job of showing you Yusuke's life was kind of like, I wouldn't say in the shithole, but it was very
going nowhere.
It was mundane, and he felt like he didn't really have anyone, and even the connections he did have were a little different like even with his main squeeze, Keiko, was they were kind of constantly going at each other. Even if it was playful, some of them it was confusing knowing where they stood together.
Yeah.
And even his kind of only friend Kuwabara, you know what their connection is? Beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got the sense that with Yusuke early on, he had like these genuine connections with whether it was with Keiko or Kuwabara, but he didn't know how to express them at the time, which was okay. You know, he was 14 years old.
Doesn't look 14, but
yeah, none of the characters in Yu Yu Hakusho look like their age. They all look like they're heading to college, but or are well in college.
Yeah.
But you know, with Yusuke, especially like, you know, his relationship with his mother, which was like, you know, his mother loves him, but she's a drunk. She's dealing with her own demons, and she just doesn't have the capacity to raise him properly.
Yeah.
You know, so when he's dead, and you know, Yusuke is viewed in the school as like the school thug, and you know, he's a troublemaker. None of his teachers like him. The only person who shows any sort of investment in him is the principal, Sariaski Junior High.
He has tough love too.
Yeah,
so.
he gives him tough love, and you're like, okay, well, this is a boy who is lost. There's not a lot of people rooting for him, in all honesty, other than, I mean, you know, he's got Keiko, always tries to put him on the right path, but he's just not in an environment where he feels like he belongs.
And they sell it really well. You could see other anime where they try to force these like weird social situations and spin it and like, no, they were genuine. But you feel it here, like after he gets hit, there's a whole part where he eventually, so when he gets hit with a car, he gets an egg he has to hatch. And he's essentially gets a lowdown of what he actually has in life after he's passed, how people like reflect on him dying, where it shows he had quite a bit. He just was pretty blind to it because of the mundaneness of his life. And I think they said that pretty well. The complexities of the tough love he got from everywhere, including his crush and his best friend and even his mom and principal. They all loved him, but just not in conventional ways that were easy to understand. And as a 14-year-old boy, of course you wouldn't understand that. It's a little complicated.
I thought it was also a very good message in the sense that, like, with, you know, a lot of people, no matter what you're dealing with, if you think like your life holds no significance or anything like that, you might be just a small little ripple in a pond, but you know, your ripple is still touching other people. And that's what Yusuke got to see, where he was made to believe for a long time he wasn't really worth anything, or he wasn't going to amount to anything, but there were still all of these people who showed up to show him respect, to mourn his passing. Kuwabara being like having one of the more powerful reactions, where
it's my favorite reaction for sure.
You know, this is, you know, Kuwabara, who's trying to be tough. He's trying to be the big guy around the block there, and you know, Yusuke's passing. All he ever wanted to do was have Yusuke acknowledge his strength and stuff like that, and to compete against him. And with Yusuke gone, he would never get that chance. And
him storming in with like the people holding him back, and he's just like in tears. That for a first episode, you don't expect that immediate emotional like character development, but they do a pretty amazing job getting you invested in Yusuke's social life pretty quickly, which they really needed to do because, you know, I love Yu Yu Hakusho, but the first 3 episodes, maybe 4 or 5 actually, are
almost 5.
Yeah, it takes a bit. If you weren't interested in Yusuke's relationships with characters, I could easily see someone being like, man, where's the Shonen fights, man?
Yeah, the first 5 episodes, I could see why it would be easy for people to check out. There's a payoff because, you know, with Yusuke, like, what's happening is, I mean, he's introduced to the Grim Reaper Botan, who's got a very amazing design as a character.
I love her.
Being the fact that she's a Grim Reaper, but she's dressed in this pink kimono riding a oar, and, you know, she's just this cute girl with blue hair.
Adorable.
She's so adorable, and she's a sweetheart, and she's like his guide slash assistant, so to speak, and you have Koenma, who's this little like toddler who's basically running Spirit World in his dad's stead.
And you have these two clashing characters. Like, so this person's like the ruler of Spirit World, and this other girl's the Grim Reaper, and they're both just cute.
Yeah, and you're just like,
so
what
weird.
Is happening here? And basically, Koenma is, you know, telling you, you know, you can hatch this egg, or you can reach out to someone who wants you to come back. Like, you know, I'll give you your life back. And he's essentially able to do that with being able to reach out as a medium, sort of, or, you know, using different mediums to reach Keiko and Kuwabara. Kuwabara, you find out, is very spiritually aware. They're able to help, you know, preserve his body and make sure he comes back. And ultimately, he comes back. And the caveat to where, you know, that gets the story going with Yusuke coming back is he has to work for Koenma as a spirit detective.
And shenanigans ensue, and this is where I would say where most people would start really hopping on board with Yu Yu Hakusho because it's more of the shonen element.
Yeah, so I think like his first case was against Goki,
Goki,
Karama,
yeah.
and Hiei. So this was like Yusuke's first big thing, which was just like you find out like these three important items were stolen from Spirit World's vault. They don't really go into how. They were just stolen, and it's the Overboss, the Mirror of the Forlorn Hope, and the Shadow Sword. Each of them obviously do different things, and Yusuke has to like get them back. And he's very inexperienced as a spirit detective, and Botan is instantly like, this case is way over his head, and Koenma is like, well, there was no one else I could put on the case.
There's no one else we have. So
Yeah,
blah, 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 blah.
which becomes like a reoccurring thing. Obviously, it's like, okay, you could just, which is obviously a plot driver, but it's just
let me
like,
see your list of employees. Dude.
yeah, obviously, because you never get the sense that there are any other spirit detectives until way later in the show, and you're like, okay, is this 14-year-old who's so inexperienced your only spirit detective? Because that's what it's seeming
These
like.
aren't low-level demons. Like, you start to see quickly when you meet Hiei, like, this isn't a dude, some starter little wet behind the ears spirit detective should be fighting.
Exactly.
At
So,
all.
Yusuke is put in a position where he's got to fight like these supposedly like three very powerful demons, and they seem to be in league together. Their ultimate goal isn't really known as a group, but they all just
They're hardly a group. They're just sort of using each other, it
Yeah.
feels like, to get what they want.
Goki pretty much has the Overboss, which allows him to take human souls out of their body, and he can feed on them. He seems to be doing it a lot with children, and Yusuke is able to, with Botan's help and giving him different spirit detective
Well, I mean, Goki himself, like,
Yeah.
you see him stand next to Kurama and Hiei, like, I wonder who the mainstay characters are.
Yeah, you see them
really
like
boring
Yusuke
looking
comes
guy.
upon the three of them all having like some meeting where it seemed like they were arguing, and Kurama like leaves instantly, and just because he's just like, well, I've got what I want, and I'm just gonna have to bow out of this alliance.
I'm gonna bounce.
So he leaves, and so this leaves Yusuke going up against Goki. Yusuke has the ability to, to fire off a spirit gun, which is essentially like his Kamehameha in the show.
And it's a cooler one.
It's a cooler
It's
one.
a way cooler one.
Like at the beginning of the show, he has like rounds that he has to use, and like they appear as like these little spirit orbs on the tips of his fingers
So
that
cool.
let him know how much ammo he has.
I sure wish they would remember that he could do that.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like that ever stays as a thing.
Togashi clearly forgets that was a thing. Like,
After a while, he could just fire this off like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And
essentially, he like shows this fight is kind of showing the audience that Yusuke might be in over his head,
Mhm.
and then I believe the fight doesn't even really end. It just sort of Goki runs away because he sees like Botan or senses Botan or something.
oh, something. I don't know. This fight, all I remember is how it ended. It was like Yusuke had to fight him like twice, and
Yeah.
and it's because Goki, when he transforms, I mean, he's a Kyukon Ki. That's the race of demon that they name him as. And his skin is supposed to be impenetrable. So Yusuke is able to, like, plant a log in between Goki's jaws. And he fires it off and shoots a spirit gun basically inside of his mouth. And that kills him.
It's first victory as a spirit detective. They had to do it some way. He's not the most interesting, but it was a decent segue into the way more interesting character, Kurama, our boy.
Oh, boy.
Oh boy, I worship this man. So he has the forlorn hope, and his story is very touching, and it was interesting that they introduced this so early, where it's, this character isn't a bad guy, he just needs help, and the only way he needs help for his problem is to kind of mingle with these, I guess, suspect characters. Though his connection with Hiei is a lot deeper than just this initial meeting. He essentially has a mom who is really like sick and she needs some help. And to do that, he needs the forlorn hope, which I believe it grants your wish, but it was at the cost of, was it your spirit energy or is it your life?
It's supposed to take your life.
Yeah, your life. So Yusuke ends up being, the cool badass guy he is. He kind of hooks him up with his own life.
The mirror specifically says that it was touched by both of their
selfless deeds.
Yeah, selflessness to sacrifice themselves for like somebody else. So it saved Kurama's mother and essentially granted both of them life. What was interesting about this was the fact that you got the sense like, okay, Yusuke's gonna have to fight all three of them. So when he meets Kurama instantly is just like, I just want to talk.
Yeah, he's hands up.
And it's just like, and you never got the sense of like, okay, this character's like a coward or anything like that. He was just like, I just want to talk. Like, I'm not here for what you think I'm here for. And he was like, and once I use the mirror, you can have it back.
Yeah, they never go out of their way to show you that, oh, Kurama can't fight. It's just that he doesn't want to.
Yeah, he doesn't want to, and he basically kind of tells Yusuke a small, like, little snippet into his backstory that he isn't a human body, but he was once a demon. He had to inhabit the body of this woman who was pregnant, who becomes his human mother. He intended to leave once his powers returned, because you find out Kurama was once like this super powerful demon in his past life.
One of the most infamous demons.
Yeah, one of the most infamous demons in the Yu Yu Hakusho lore. And he intended to leave once his powers were restored, but he grew to fall in love with this woman. Not like that, but
like a paternal,
he began to look at her essentially as she was his real mother, and he would like do anything for her.
And like, I think about it as like, he was kind of turned into like a puppy, and then the puppy got adopted, and of course you're gonna love the hand that fed you, right? It made sense, and it was a really cool way to kind of introduce these other characters in the Yu Yu Hakusho lore while also adding to the roster. Kurama to me is one of the best characters in the whole show.
Yeah.
And it starts out pretty immediately too with the whole switch of, oh, here are these three demons, and they're scary, and watch out. And then immediately you meet Kurama, and he's like, nah, man, I'm cool.
Yeah.
It's
and
like,
he looks so unassuming.
Oh,
so,
yeah, he looks like the pretty boy.
Yeah, he's the pretty boy of the group, basically. Once, that whole ordeal was finished, that moves us on to, our resident badass of the show.
The goat!
Hiei, everyone's favorite fire demon.
If you're a Vegeta stan, you're most likely
you will
Hiei
like
stan.
Hiei.
Yeah, you're a giant Hiei fan. They're short, spiky-haired, and just quick fuses.
Yep. And so, like, with Hiei,
I will say, yeah, at first, when you first meet Hiei, he is kind of the grr, I'm bad, and just kind of like cocky. His layers don't get peeled back till a little later. Thankfully, in the same arc, they don't do that thing where you don't really get his intrigue till a season later. They show it. You just have to kind of get through his first conflict with Yusuke before you start really understanding Hiei as a character, which I guess works because his attitude here does tie into his character. His thing, he has the spirit sword, the shadow sword. I believe it has the ability to
the shadow. No, okay. So the Jagan eye that he has is just completely it's an artificial demonic eye that he had implanted in him for reasons you'll find out about later.
Yeah.
The shadow sword, what it does is, when he cuts humans with it, it gives them like a pseudo Jagan eye. It's not as powerful.
So that's right. So the shadow sword was what kind of implants the fake Jagan eye.
Yeah, it's this pseudo Jagan eye that's nowhere near as powerful as Hiei's actual Jagan eye, and it turns them into like these mindless slaves essentially. And that's what Hiei was doing, and he ends up kind of tailing Yusuke, stalking him, finds out about Keiko.
And this is where I'm happy to say, Keiko as a character, and we kind of glossed over her. She's a very serviceable character. I like Keiko. She can be kind of, you can explain her as she is the girl character in the anime, but because she has so much bite and her relationship with Yusuke works so well, I really like Keiko, and she's forgivable in most any situation. She's not the damsel in distress all the time like other anime side characters, but sadly, she is kind of in that situation in the very beginning with Hiei kidnapping her and essentially striking her with that shadow sword and putting that Jagan eye on her head, which slowly starts opening, and Botan, bless her soul, starts holding it back so she doesn't fully turn into like a zombie slave for Hiei, which kicks off Yusuke's and Hiei's first fight, which is a pretty good fight. I do think their back and forth initially is a little quick. He goes into the really badass Jagan eye form fairly quickly, but once he does it, it really shows the power scale tilt into Hiei's direction.
Yeah, the dub mistakenly calls it his true form, and it's really not.
Yeah, especially with knowing the Jagan eye was an implant thing too, so it's like that really doesn't fit. That's his true form.
Yeah, they mistakenly say that. Hiei is a fire apparition, born to a race of ice apparitions, which are all women. So I mean, we kind of get into that later on with what's the case with that, but he gets the Jagan eye, like we said, it's implanted. It was an artificial thing that happened to him. So the Jiganai grants him deeper levels of power that when he was getting the Jiganai was not his intended purpose. He just needed it for another reason. But it does give him access to other abilities like telekinesis, telepathy, astral projection.
And you even realize that the Jiganai actually hinders his level a bit too. So the fact that he was giving Yusuke this much of a fade post Jiganai implant tells you a lot.
Yeah, it also does give him deeper. It allows him to tap into his fire demon abilities to a greater degree, which you find out more about in the Dark Tournament. But the Jiganai form, where he turns like all green, his spiky hair parts into where it looks like a horn formation, and then he's just got these eyes all over his body.
He looks way more demon-esque.
He looked really cool, and this form, we see this form once. Twice if you count the Poltergeist Report movie. But
severely underused.
It should have been used way more than it was. But this is like the only time you see it, and like I hate it because it's really a cool form.
But the cool part about this fight too, thankfully, isn't just on Hiei's part too. Yusuke has a really great where being a detective, he starts doing some detective work during the fight, which. Again, another aspect of Yu Yu Hakusho where they don't do a whole lot of detective-ing in the Spirit Detective. But you see where Togashi kind of was giving Yusuke this kind of analytical aspect. As he was fighting, he's not perfect. He's not Kurama levels of an intellectual. But you can see where his ingenuity kind of kicks in when it needs to. And in this case, it's, oh, he's way faster than me. He's way stronger than me. I have a projectile attack, like Spirit Gun. But the dude is so fast, if he sees me pointing at it, of course he's going to dodge it. But thankfully in this fight, the Forlorn Hope, which by the way is a mirror, is sitting in the area, but like in a corner.
It's like in a corner, yeah.
Yeah, and he sees it. And so he pops off the Spirit Gun while Hiei is mid-strike. But of course, it's not aiming at him, so Hiei just neglects it entirely as like, oh, it was a stupid misfire. Mm-hmm. But it bounces off the mirror and hits him in the back. One of my favorite quotes, too, is after that works, and he ends the fight, because a back and forth between him and Kurama, where he's like, man, that was genius, Yusuke. How'd you know that wasn't going to work? And he's like, I didn't.
Yeah, Kurama calls him a lucky fool. One thing about the actual fight between Hiei and Yusuke that was interesting to me, and this is like the fight nerd in me, is like Yusuke in Yu Yu Hakusho probably has the best hands.
Oh my god!
In the show,
yeah,
he has the best hands. Hiei, I think Hiei is equal to Yusuke in throwing hands. Where they like clash with it that makes them so even is like I think their hand-to-hand combat is very even. Hiei is faster. But Yusuke has good instincts. And so like to me when it was like when you see them at the starter level of the show and that's the fight you got between them where it was kind of very back and forth. Yeah. That's what always made me, and then when you see them at their peak at the end of the show, that's what always made me want to see a rematch between them.
Me too. And spoiler alert,
you get a tussle. They give you this tussle.
Do you call it that? Really?
But it's not actually what you think is. They throw hands,
right?
And when you, I promise you, when you see it, and it's not until like two arcs later on, and we get into it. It's like when you see it, you're like, oh, finally, this is about to happen.
We need it.
And then they kind of talk about it like, oh, I've been wanting to get my hands on you again. And then it's like you get it's okay, but it's not like the all like in Dragon Ball Z.
It doesn't answer what you want.
It doesn't. Which I mean, Dragon Ball Z didn't even do. But when we got the rematch between Goku and Vegeta, it was hot.
Oh my god!
And it lived up to it.
So
it was
Dragon Ball Z gets that.
Yeah, we'll give Dragon Ball Z that where with the two rival main characters when they threw hands again, it was like it's about time. and then boy did they throw hands. Whereas in Yu Yu Hakusho, we never got that sort of. Hiei and Yusuke are always like Hiei is the epitome of the rival in the show, but the rematch. It's not even really one, and you guys will see it later.
And yet, I like the comparison that you made there too, because Hiei feels like the let's say he's like the champion fighter, where he can end the fight with way fewer punches, but Yusuke is the underdog scrap that will force and brutalize his way into being a part of this conversation because of just how he can just think outside of the box, using his fists the way that maybe Hiei doesn't necessarily do it. Hiei can, especially in this arc, felt like he could end any fight whenever he really wanted to. Yeah. While Yusuke will be the one who's like, oh, you look down on me? Oh, okay.
Yeah, especially when we get into later as like Yu Yu Hakusho with our four characters appearing as like a team. You do essentially get this thing to where it's just like Hiei and Yusuke essentially fill the roles of like your frontline powerhouses.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, well, who's the better one here? But for me, it's what the scales that tip in either their favor are Hiei's speed and Yusuke's ingenuity.
Yeah. I can forgive people throwing in Kuwabara too, but Kuwabara is sorely underutilized to where that conversation becomes, well, how could you pick Kuwabara over Hiei? To me is the question, right?
Yeah, there's really no way.
And I really want to. You're going to hear a lot of like issues with Togashi's writing with Kuwabara, and it's not that because we don't love Kuwabara. I adore the shit out of Kuwabara when he does things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But like going forward, we'll kind of like skim past this one. After this, where this is Yusuke's his first case is solved.
His assignment's done.
You go into the Genkai tournament arc, which really isn't a tournament, but essentially, she's this old psychic who is looking for a successor to pass her all of her abilities and her knowledge to. And there's like a demon out here who's been going around killing psychics and stuff like that and stealing their powers. And they don't want Spirit World doesn't want Genkai's powers to fall into the hands of the wrong person. So Yusuke and Kuwabara both into the tournament, and they're looking for the demon called Rando, who's been this demon going around doing this.
Super cool design.
Very cool design.
Really cool looking.
And essentially, like it's an okay fight. They are able to figure out who Rando is, and
the only other fight of note up to Rando is Kuwabara getting his spirit sword.
Yeah, Kuwabara does develop
he fights
the spirit
this
sword.
samurai guy, and the part that was cool was he was using a boken, like a wooden sword, and it breaks. So he ends up channeling and funneling his spirit energy into the shape of a sword. Pretty cool. That's kind of the only thing of note up until Yusuke versus Rando, which is one of my favorite fights in Spirited Detective. That fight is really cool just because of how insane Rando is. He feels like a later fight because he's able to actually use a spirit gun too. The fact they showed that so early I thought was interesting. Usually that's like, oh, you're fighting yourself now kind of deal is usually at the end of most shows or animes or whatever. Rando himself is not just that, though. He's adept at a lot of different spells and skills. Obviously, he's the one that's trying to get Genkai's abilities, and I believe he wants to kill her, too.
Yeah, he wants to kill her.
But the problem with him is that he's, adept at a lot of things, but a master of none of it. Yeah. So that's kind of his downfall, and his fight against Yusuke really shows that. The fight does get a little weird, where there's a part where Yusuke gets kind of hung over like a swamp.
Yeah. And
even now, I'm so confused where Rando does this little talk about these little fishes in there. And I'm confused of whether he put them there or he just
they were already there.
Or if they were already there and he just happens to know exactly about them. But he gets hung over these, like, I guess, demon fish piranha, and then he gets cut from the rope and falls into it. And of course, the power of friendship pulls Yusuke's mind out, and he goes under like a water tunnel that leads him out to another swamp. And he pops out, and he's able to pop a shot at Rando. The fight, it doesn't end Rando though, so that kind of failed. But he's back in the fight, but then he gets knocked out, and then Yusuke is on the ground. And here's where I don't like the luck thing so much. Togashi goes a little too far. So Rando, having the upper hand, goes up to Yusuke and he starts doing this incantation. And the incantation is the person he's using it on shrinks. But then weirdly enough, Rando shrinks. And it makes everyone so damn confused, including, the viewer. You're like, what the hell happened? And then Genkai, with her all-knowing ass, literally explains it as, yeah, you use it on the person, but the person has to be able to hear it. And if they can't, the person doing the spell is inflicted with the spell. And you know why that is? It's because Yusuke has gunk in his ears from the swamp. Are you fucking serious?
Yeah, that was a bit of a...
That's a stretch.
That was a stretch.
In the best cases, that's a stretch.
It would have been interesting if he had just knocked Yusuke out and didn't know about... And, so Yusuke didn't technically hear it because he's unconscious.
And exactly. And Rando's lack of knowledge with the things he's absorbed into his body, with the knowledge he has, it would have been way more interesting that he has so many tools under his belt, but he doesn't know them well enough that it's his downfall.
He doesn't know all the intricacies of the techniques he's using. So that would have been a little bit better than just Yusuke having gunk in his
The stupid main character luck bullshit, which they already exercised with the Hiei fight by him landing the reflective shot into Hiei's back. That would have been fine. But, you know, whatever. We forgive it. It was a fun fight with a fun character. So
Yusuke ends the fight with, you know, a people's elbow.
Which was already worth it.
So he does that. And essentially what ends up happening at the end is Genkai takes on Yusuke as an apprentice.
And she's the best mentor in anime.
Yeah, she is. Like, fight me. So all you Master Roshis and Jiraiya. I mean, you know, okay, soft spots for him, but no.
Yeah.
Genkai's handing out hands.
Oh, absolutely. She hands out hands and knowledge.
So, essentially, so after this is the Four Saint Beast arc, which is probably the highlight, I would say, of the Spirit Detective arc.
With the caveat of Genbu.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, with this arc, there's 4 demons. There's 4 demons that exist in the outskirts of Spirit World that are using these Makai insects to enter into the human world. And these demon insects are infecting humans, and they're making them like, oh, mind the zombies again. But
oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. So
it's like the go-to.
Essentially, Yusuke, being the only spirit detective available again, has to go take on these 4 demons that he has no business fighting in rapid succession.
Working overtime.
So Kuwabara, of course, tags along with him.
Oh my boy.
And they enter into where the part of Spirit World where the Four Saint Beasts Maze Castle is at. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
And they encounter like these demons in the open field, and they're attacking them. And then these 2, like a blue and a red ball of light appear, and the demons get scared off. And we find out our boys, Kurama and Hiei, have been charged with joining Yusuke and helping him out, because Hiei is on probation, so he's been both of them are on probation, but Hiei has been charged with basically having to stay. He's confined to human world.
Right.
Yeah, so he has to stay there.
He's essentially working for parole.
Basically, yeah, he is on parole right now. So they're helping out, and this is also the start of a hilarious back and forth, one-sided rivalry with Hiei and Kuwabara.
I adored these
it's
two
hilarious.
Back and forth. They can't stand each other, and you can tell they love it, but also hate each other. It's so good.
It's so fun.
Especially Hiei's responses to Kuwabara's like just stubbornness and just idiots. Oh.
Yeah, Hiei. You can just tell like Hiei is just like, me and another time would have killed this guy.
This is why I said earlier when you said that was this. I think this arc was your first introduction to Yu Yu Hakusho, and I actually think it worked as a better introduction than starting from the first episode, because you get a taste of the entire cast and their dynamics together.
Yeah, right off the bat.
So if this was anyone's first foray into Yu Yu Hakusho, this is the best place to start.
Because a lot of like when you see promotional art of Yu Yu Hakusho, all of it has the 4 main
They're
guys.
all together.
So if you're starting from the beginning, you're just kind of really wondering where everyone is.
You're like, yeah, where are all the demons? This is just a boy getting hit by a car.
Yeah, so then you're just kind of like, okay. So like, yeah, I think that's what was good. So if you start like with Maze Castle and then you go back, it's a little easier.
Yeah.
But you know, building up to it is fine, just all the same. But this arc was good. We get to see, this is the first time we ever see Kurama fight, which was very interesting to see the first time. So for like the Saint Beasts, they're all based on like the 4 sacred beasts of the cardinal directions in Chinese mythology. So you have the dragon, the phoenix, the tiger, and the turtle.
Yeah.
And in that mythology, they're known as Ginbu,
Byakko,
Seiryu, and Suzaku.
And I will say, all the designs are pretty great, just except for Genbu, who's just a rock guy.
Yeah, he's a spiky looking rock.
Like, take Onyx from Pokemon and just give him more limbs.
Yeah, that's essentially what he is.
What
so
he looks like.
Genbu is this giant like rock thing, and
he's serviced as here's what Kurama can do, and he has this ability where Kurama shows his Rosebud for the first time, and it was really cool. Also staggering as a kid, where Dragon Ball Z, as we stated before, was really big at the time. So seeing Kurama, who's just kind of like pretty boy, flail around a rose whip, it was kind of jarring, going from like, why is this so cool?
Yeah, it was.
Why is this cooler than most of the big brutal macho stuff in Dragon Ball Z? And as a kid, it was hard trying to throw Kurama up in your favorite like characters list, is because everyone's like, oh man, that's gay. And it's just like...
Or like if people use weapons, it's always like swords. So I mean, and we've already got one in the group with Hiei. You know, who's the sword? I mean, Kuwabara's got the spirit sword, but the swordsman in the group is Hiei. It's not even close.
To the part where they mentioned that in Dark Tournament.
Yeah. So like when Kurama takes this rose out, and you're like,
you're like, oh, what does this do?
What is happening? And then he uses the rose whip, and like these rose petals all fall down, and like the rose whip is essentially this giant vine with like thorns
and
on
stuff,
it.
And
it's cool looking, honestly, and it has the ability to cut through any solid object, including stone, which is what Genbu was made out of. Ironically. So, and when Kurama moves that whip, it just like you don't even even see how quickly he can lash it around.
And they really bullet point that, where next thing you know, Genbu's like in 2 pieces. But then Genbu does have this caveat where he
can put himself back together
and multiply at that point, right?
No, he's able to shoot parts of his body out.
That's right.
Yeah, he's able to shoot parts of his body out.
It makes it to where it could be a problem, but then he underestimates just how Kurama can just obliterate him.
Yeah, Kurama has a very good. He's the resident tactician of the group, and his analytical abilities are just like second to none. Mm-hmm. To the point to where like Kurama's so deadly he can kill you without thinking about it, and that's something that y'all find out about later. When I say like he doesn't think about it,
let's say conversation is his weapon, and I'm not kidding.
So he's able to like pinpoint that there's like this little part of Genbu's brain that he can see that sends out a signal that tells his body to form itself back together. Kurama's able to grab it, and then Genbu puts himself back together, but the wrong way. And then Kurama just like cuts him up again. He blows up.
And bam. And that's pretty much it for Genbu. And it's going to sound weird because now it's harping on Genbu, but I actually prefer this over the better design of Byakuya, because the fight with Byakuya against Kuwabara is one of the most frustrating damn things.
And it starts this trend of, while Kuwabara is a lovable and funny character, they don't seem to know, and Togashi didn't really seem to know how to write a lot of Kuwabara's fights.
Right. And you know what? In retrospect, if Kuwabara had learned from this and maybe changed his fighting style or had something to gain from how long it took him to beat Byakuya, I would have been okay with this. Not that it would have made watching it any less frustrating, but I would have understood it. This sadly starts a trend of just Kuwabara feeling a little inept in the group that doesn't ever really get rectified.
It doesn't, and I'm fine with the fact that that you have a character who realizes, or might not even realize, but
well, he does like Dark Tournament.
Yeah, kind of.
He has like
where
a speech
it's
about
like
it.
where you have a character who is essentially the obvious. Okay, if there's a weak link in the chain, that it's him. Yeah. That is fine, but it doesn't seem like Kuwabara. Yeah, like Jacob just said, like ever rectifies it. And
it's not that he doesn't want to, though. And that's what's really frustrating about Kuwabara is you can tell he very much wants to win and he wants to help the group. It feels like Togashi never lets him do it.
He never lets him do it, and he doesn't allow Kuwabara to learn from his mistakes. In the Dark Tournament, there's literally a fight where he makes the same mistake twice against two opponents in the same round.
I was just about to say, it's frustrating when I could say Byakuya's fight is indicative of just about every Kuwabara fight. That's sadly not an understatement.
Yeah, and it got to the point with me as a kid watching it where whenever I saw Kuwabara about to fight, I was like, oh, God.
And that's not what you want, because it's weird. When Kuwabara's up to bat for a fight, you're like, all right, here we go. But anytime he opens his mouth and then you have a situation, you're like, hell yeah, Kuwabara.
Yeah, like, all right, Kuwabara. But it's like, but whenever he's going to fight, I'm always like, someone else get in there.
It essentially takes him 3 episodes, and you get under the impression that if any other person in that group took it, it would have probably taken half of 1 episode.
Yeah, and it's many times where Kuwabara's in a fight where Hiei will make the remark like he or Yusuke or Kurama should have fought the guy.
Exactly.
And as the viewer, you literally get that impression, which I'm fine with that.
Me too.
The first time.
Yeah.
But that has to change later. I should not, every time this guy's going to fight in a show that is predominantly fighting, I should not be irritated. It's almost like when Kuwabara is fighting, and if you're, any guys who are fans of this, and you're like watching UFC or you're watching boxing, you're like, Kuwabara is essentially like all those fights on the card you don't care about. And I'm just like, please get to the main event.
Kuwabara's the guy
someone knock someone out.
Kuwabara's the guy you follow on Twitter for his funny memes, but then when he gets into a fight, you're like, I'm skipping it.
Yeah, like just to harp on it one more time, it's like Kuwabara, whenever I saw him fight, it was to the point where I was like, someone just lose.
Yeah.
Like,
please,
just hurry up.
Absolutely.
I don't even care at this point.
And hell, he doesn't even get to finish him off. So after the fight, Byakko, I don't even want to get into the fight because it's just them going back and forth for a while. And then Byakko essentially falls into lava. Then, spoiler alert, no, not really.
Yeah.
And then he comes back to where you get to meet the first really cool looking of the same piece, Seiryu. And Seiryu just bodies him. So it's really annoying watching 3 episodes of a fight. Kuwabara doesn't finish it. And then just to show you how amazingly powerful the next dude is, he just immediately obliterates him.
Yeah, Seiryu just like,
ices him.
Yeah, and
literally, he has ice ability.
Yeah, Seiryu is the blue
yeah.
dragon who, his ability is ice, and Byakko comes helping him to like, asking him for help. Let's take these guys on together. And Seiryu's like, no, you've embarrassed us, and da 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 da.
And some of the writing issues kind of crop up here too, because Seiryu is Hiei's fight, and this fight is great, but some of the writing tidbits behind it bother me a bit. So Hiei, for some reason, has beef with how Seiryu treated Byakko. But even in the fight, Kurama comments like, oh, it's really weird that Hiei feels this way because, I've seen Hiei do something similar or worse. And then they never really touch on that.
He just says something like Hiei's honor code is like very complex or something like that. And I'm like,
and it's not
well,
complex.
Explain that.
Yeah, it's not complex. It's nonsensical. It's the problem.
It's nonsensical.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're upset because he did something that you've done similarly, but it's like, but why is this a problem?
So it was a way for Togashi to...
It's okay because it's you doing it and not someone else. That's essentially what it sounds like.
And I wouldn't even mind that if they, helped tell you that. But no, it's just this random time where he picked out a time where, I have a little bit of morality here for no reason, and it goes away after the fight.
Yeah.
It's like...
It was like almost like, okay, Hiei was feeling generous that day.
Yeah, well, it's just weird because if they, if he had that revelation 2 arcs later, it would have fit perfectly because Togashi every other time does an amazing job showing the progression of Hiei's morality and where he stands. But in this, for some reason, it's almost like Hiei from the future snaps in for 1 second.
Yeah. So what essentially happens here is, Hiei, you also get the sense with this one, Hiei could have ended this fight whenever because Seiryu freezes like Hiei's limbs. And you really get the sense of Hiei's strength and how fast he is. Because, even with his fire abilities, he just kind of melts Seiryu's ice as soon as, the fight is over. Just kind of could have done this any time. Yeah. But he, slashes Seiryu, and it's, so many slashes, no one was able to follow it. And, kills him. The fight is quick.
Yeah, and remember, Seiryu, immediately killed Byakko, so if that doesn't totally tell you that Hiei could have bodied him in half an episode... What else?
Yeah. So pretty much after that is
the coolest looking one.
Yeah, Suzaku.
Clamp looking ass.
Yes, Suzaku.
His ex 1999.
that is essentially what he looks like. Yeah. Suzaku against Yusuke, and that was a good fight. And that was,
I do like Yusuke, and this has shotgun in it.
Yeah, this is the debut of Yusuke's shotgun technique, which was so interesting. If you
don't make Justin Cook's delivery of shotgun your ringtone, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, I remember as a kid just seeing Yusuke charge it up because Suzaku had the ability called the Prism of 7, where he was able to multiply himself and.
And he has cool moves, too.
Yeah, Suzaku had really cool moves. And he was carrying around the demon flute that controlled the Makai insects. And when Yusuke fires off the shotgun, it was just gave me chills as a kid. It gave me chills. But the fight was really good. It was very, very back and forth where the Makai insects were infecting so many people. And in Yusuke's school, the teaching staff and the principal were all infected, so it's Botan and Keiko. They're Botan's protecting Keiko, but they're running trying to escape these guys.
It's one of those instances where I even said earlier where Keiko is a fun character where she doesn't really feel like she's in the way. I could feel in another anime, Yusuke would have had to stop what he's doing to go back to human world to save Keiko, but Keiko and Botan handle it themselves.
Yeah, they were handling it themselves, and Suzaku has all of everything what's going on for him and Yusuke to be able to see, and he's commentating on it like it's a horror movie.
Yeah, I was about to say it had a little bit of a horror element. I like that narrative a bit. It was really
and he kept saying this is the time where the young damsel or whatever, and he's saying all these things, and Yusuke's just getting upset, and Yusuke eventually beats him, of course. Like I said, it was a good fight.
Back and forth. More so of a back and forth than with the gym where Yusuke just kind of pulls one out of his ears, literally.
Yeah, it was a good one, and he, that's the closing of that case. Essentially, breaks the flu and all that stuff, and everybody goes back to normal. And this next arc is pretty much the closing of the overall Spirit Detective arc.
Most of the story nuggets drop in here,
Yeah,
especially for
going
Hiei.
forward.
Yeah.
That's going to set the tone for the remainder of Yu Yu Hakusho.
And I'm really glad Togashi decided to kind of punctuate the ending of Spirit Detective with some more Hiei stuff, just because of how little you got of him. Because Kurama tells you a little bit, while you're just left spectating for Hiei up until this point. So essentially, there's a underground little business called the Black Club?
Yeah, the Black Club.
Where it's these little spit fucks in suits. And they have this kind of mafioso-esque business, and they all have these little hilariously Kaiba Corp looking discussions on these screens.
The Big Five from Yu-Gi-Oh!
That's what I was thinking too.
The Big Five.
The Big Five. It's that, but better drawn.
Yeah.
And what's the main dude's name? The fat guy. What was his name? Tarukane. He essentially kidnaps this girl named Yukina, who's this beautiful blue-haired little girl.
She's an ice apparition.
She's an ice apparition, and she cries jewels, which is where he gets a lot of his funding. And then on top of that, he makes these little Fight Club-esque situations where they bet exorbitant amounts of money, like $4 billion.
Yeah, and it's always demons fighting each other.
And that's where they get it. When you're also introduced to this man named Toguro and his older brother, Elder Toguro.
Yeah, you don't ever get their first names. They're just called the Toguro brothers.
And this is where we have some hot takes.
Yeah, so essentially, Kawinma sends Yusuke on the job to go save this girl. And there's all these ramifications with Yusuke having to save her that Kawinma doesn't tell him about because, spoiler alert, the ice apparition Yukina is Hiei's twin sister.
And it's such a cool dynamic too, which does lead me to an issue with her character, but at this point in the story, super awesome.
Yeah, it's a very cool reveal, and the reason why he needs Yusuke to save her is, one, because obviously the jewels that she's able to get, they're not really supposed to get in human hands.
Absolutely
to be put for
not.
profit. But the main reason is because Hiei is aware that his sister has been kidnapped.
And Hiei will level that
Hiei
whole
will
area.
wreck shop to go get that girl back. And it's now the interesting thing about this is Yukina is aware that she has a brother that's missing, but she doesn't know that it's Hiei.
And Hiei prefers it that way.
He keeps it that way, and it's the reason why he has the Jigan Eye.
And it's these weird situations where, outside of Kuwabara, who, by the way, crushes on her so damn hard, but everyone else in that show pretty much knows that they're related, especially Kurama, who's
Yeah, Kurama knows from off the bat, obviously.
Kurama knows so much shit in this show, but I really like Hiei's stance here, where you get a glimpse of his humanity, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
Where he makes sure she never figures out as if to protect her, and maybe even hating himself with how he is because he doesn't want to be involved with her.
He was she's such an innocent person that he wouldn't want her to know that her brother is the person that he is. But a lot of Hiei's motivations are from protecting her. The reason he gets the Jigan eye surgery was for multiple reasons. One was to find her. One was to find the village that abandoned him.
And I think it was he had that amulet that he was.
Yeah, they both had the tears that their mother cried when she died, when she gave birth to them.
Which did they talk about that? Or that's the fourth arc they talk about.
Yeah, you don't find, as a kid, this is what I remember. You don't ever see, you don't see Hiei wearing it throughout the show.
No.
You see her with one, I think.
I know she has it.
She
and
has
I swear to God, there's promotional.
That's
art.
what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. There's so much, even before they get to that arc where you find out about Hiei's jewel, there's so much promotional arc of him wearing it.
There's a picture I drew before I even got to halfway through Dark Tournament where I was drawing pictures of Yusuke on the internet and he had it already.
He had it all. There's so much. So it was almost like when I'm watching the show,
and
they got it, and once you get to the part where they revealed Hiei's jewel, and it's given back to him because you find out as a child he lost it. You're going through the show thinking he had it the entire time.
I always do.
And you're like, oh, he lost it. Okay.
And even revisiting the show, me and you, Adrian, damn near watches this show yearly. And I still forget that he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
At these
And
episodes.
I remember as a kid always looking up Yu Yu Hakusho.
And that plain promotional art, because he always has it in the damn picture.
He always has it in
swear he does.
almost all the promotional art. And you're like...
It's a part of his character outfit for me.
Yeah,
That's
and you're
so
just like,
weird.
so like drawing Hiei, like if he's not having the cloak on.
Yeah.
And there's not like the jewel stylishly blowing in the wind around his neck. You're like, where is it?
Yeah.
You're like, Hiei's naked.
So I don't think they touch on it till the last arc, but in your head you're like, okay, this is their connection. He got the Jagan Eye for morality purposes, damn near. It's for personal reasons, and I like that.
And that was really cool. And then you find out like the reason he gets it, and one caveat to him getting it was he could never tell her who he was. But but then you find out he never intended on telling her.
He never planned on it anyway, so it was an easy trade.
Yeah, he was like, fine, I wasn't gonna tell her. But essentially, to get back to what Yusuke and Kuwabara are doing, they're going through the mansion, fighting off all these different demons, essentially, and they fight their way to the Toguro brothers.
Again, I think I said the word hot take before. So promotional art, a lot of people love to throw out Toguro as the big, cool, giant villain of Yu Yu Hakusho,
and he's the most iconic.
I'm not trying to disregard that. He is. I'll admit he's the first giant threat.
He's the most recognizable villain from Yu Yu Hakusho.
But he doesn't do anything interesting per se. He's just your big, buff, brute guy with the mentality you can already guess in one glance. It's, I want to get stronger, and I want to find someone who can beat me. It doesn't get... Okay, there are some interesting elements sprinkled in, but it doesn't really help elevate that's really his character.
At all.
That is it.
And you're like, and that was the thing with Toguro as a character, is that he benefited when you guys will see when we talk about the Dark Tournament. He really benefits from being the final threat in that arc, because that arc is so iconic.
100%.
But his motivations as a character don't hold up for me.
Especially when you compare it to the later characters. Even characters in the Dark Tournament have more interesting reasons to be at that tournament than Toguro's entire character arc.
Yeah.
Which is a little aggravating.
And when you guys watch the fight between Yusuke Kuwabara and the Toguro brothers, where like younger Toguro, who is the main threat, he's the big guy, his muscles just get bigger and 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 bigger.
To where it's disgusting.
It's really bad. And then the elder Toguro, who kind of just sits on his back like this creepy little thing.
He just looks like
he has the ability
guy.
to like just transform his body into like almost anything, and then his limbs can, like not his limbs, his organs, he can move them around. He can do whatever he wants with his body, essentially.
And I feel bad saying it, but this to me is actually the most interesting Toguro fight, just because of the weirdness of his older brother turning into the weapon. That little creativity aspect to their dynamic is more interesting to me than, spoiler alert, the Dark Tournament fight where he just powers up.
Yeah, and when you watch this, you're like, okay, all right, Toguro is essentially just clapping Yusuke and Kuwabara hard.
Not even a fight.
It's not a fight.
It's a
it's
bully.
Really it's just like, okay, there's levels to this.
Yeah.
And y'all are clearly not on his. And you're just like, okay, how are they supposed to beat him? Essentially, and what's kind of funny as this is happening, Hiei is up in like the room overseeing the fight where Terukane is, and he's just clapping Terukane,
yeah.
like just beating the piss out of Terukane. And Yukina is able to calm him down and tell him like, no, I don't want him to die. And he's like, okay.
And this is a big moment too, because Hiei establishes multiple times that no one can tell him what to do, but Yukina tells him to stop, and he obliges, and even like rationalizes it with being like, "You're not worth her crying over you." It was really cool character moment that outshines the beatdown Toguro is getting.
Yeah, well, it's just, and then it's like, meanwhile.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the main characters are dying.
Yeah, they're just getting beat down, but they do have this cool moment where there's really some cool tag team moments with Yusuke and Kuwabara throughout this part. Like there was the one earlier when they're going through the mansion where they like charged up their feet and they jumped in there and they just stomped this dude in the face. That was really cool. But
they needed more of those moments.
In the Toguro fight, so they decide like Kuwabara, uses a spirit sword, and Yusuke fires his spirit gun off into Kuwabara's back, and it propels him forward. And he just like jabs Toguro into the stomach, and that's what ends the fight. Now, when you get into the Dark Tournament arc, and you're like, Togoro's main motivation here is, we're obviously going to talk about that in the Dark Tournament video, where it's like, I want to fight you, Yusuke. It's like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Yeah, so we want to touch on it now because it kind of topical for this scene. So he gets interested in Yusuke, even though you watch that fight, and all of you in the comments tell us if you think who did the most work, Kuwabara or Yusuke.
I would still say they did the equal amount of work.
But how do you ascertain either one?
Yeah, it's like, how do you ascertain either one when both are getting stomped?
100%.
And then Kuwabara is the one whose sword stabbed you. But Yusuke is the one you want? It's like, okay, just say he's the main character.
Just say it.
And it's like we already knew this. But it's like that motivation is literally only based on because he's the main character.
No, I would forgive it if they said that, oh, Yusuke trained under Genkai, and that's obviously the whole reason why he's interested. But it's like, well, but Kuwabara was also with Genkai too, though. So it's like...
It was like, Kuwabara wasn't like her official apprentice, but there were some things he was able to pick up.
Yeah.
And you're like, but he's the one who stabbed you. Why aren't you trying to track down Kuwabara?
Yeah, and I don't think at this point Toguro really knows Yusuke's connection to Genkai. So I don't understand this whole, oh, I'm interested in you over this guy because.
Yeah, that's really what that was our main issue with it. It's just his motivations for coming back, because he does, spoiler alert, and wanting to fight Yusuke just don't hold.
It doesn't make sense.
It's not good.
But I will say it's a fine ending to an arc. This caps off Spirit Detective in a nutshell. Very solid arc. I think it's a great start point to any shonen anime. They had a lot of good introductions. I love all of the main cast pretty immediately. Mm-hmm. This isn't one of those cases where, oh, they introduced this character, but you don't care about him until 2 arcs later.
Exactly. Yeah, you pretty much get invested with everyone really quickly, and it's a very good starter arc. You know, like I said, some slow moments, but once it gets going, it gets going.
Thankfully, that momentum continues so hard in Dark Tournament.
It really does, and so we're gonna cap this off here with the ending of the Spirit Detective arc. And in our next episode, we're going to get into it is without a shadow of doubt the most iconic tournament arc in anime history. So forget any tournament you've seen in Dragon Ball Z. Forget your tuning exams. Forget your Hunter exams. It is the Dark Tournament. And we're going to cover that in our next episode.
And thank you for watching. And don't forget to stay jaded.